All right, so somebody said, Papa Gut, can you watch Ben Shapiro why he's voting for Donald Trump in 2020? And I'm like, sure. Ben and I are actually romantic partners, so I have no problem talking about this. Let's talk about it. I actually kind of like Ben Shapiro. I think he's a smart guy. I can't imagine. I don't know. I don't know, man. After those debates, I'm just gonna give you my personal opinion. You vote for who you guys want to. But like, there's really not a policy that Trump outdoes Biden on, and the biggest reason is because, like, honestly, Trump doesn't really have policies, right? So, like, if Trump had a policy, I might be more on board. But like, let's do the coronavirus, for instance, right? Yeah, we're trying to get vaccines and distribute them. That's fine. That's not a policy, though, right? We still need more. So I honestly think that, like, if Trump's policy was simply, social distancing, wearing a mask, and like funding for companies to be able to put up plexiglass and whatnot, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Like, more minimalistic. If he's like, hey, listen, we kind of have to reopen. Let's do it safely, and like push kind of the idea of herd immunity, I'd be like, okay, I get it. But he's just like, hey, you know what, masks, they're all right. But whatever. But there's no policy in it. There's no plan. And like, we need a plan, right? Biden has like an actual plan to do all the things that I had mentioned. When it comes to healthcare, we have to acknowledge that, Obamacare is rough, but Biden actually has a plan that would basically is kind of like Medicare for all, but maintaining a private option, trending in the right direction, which is where I want to go. Simply put, I would like to maintain a private option for insurance for people, but also advocating for a more affordable public option. Trump doesn't even have a plan. He's just like, we got to get rid of Obamacare. It's been 4 years and he's got nothing on paper, right? I don't even know that
Ben Shapiro is a homosexual, confirmed.
True, honestly. I thought I'd turn those up. What was I going to say? Oh, when it comes to climate change, Biden has a bunch of, shit going on to try to get us to like zero emissions or zero net emissions by 2050. That's great. Trump doesn't really have a policy at all. He doesn't have anything, right? And if Trump's policy, simply put, was, hey, China, stop fucking around, I would probably be more on board, but there's no policy for that. He's just kind of like, hey, well, we're bad, but look at China and India. And by the way, our numbers are really good now. Like, do you not see that we have some of the best climate numbers? Like, yeah, dog, because the country's been shut down for 8 months, right? So, of course, there's less pollutants in the air. People aren't moving. So it's like weird that he's taking responsibility for like such a great, for everything, the climate being so great as of now, when it's because like nobody was leaving. It's funny. So there's really, I'm gonna vote Biden, honestly, and I suppose we'll see why Shapiro's gonna vote Trump. We'll see. I mean, like, if you're voting Trump, that's fine. But let's see why Shapiro. I find it curious that he would vote for him now, though. That's like the weird thing. Why he's like, hey, I'm not gonna vote for him in 2016, but I am in 2020. So let's get into this.
I did not vote for Donald Trump in 2016.
Okay.
I am voting for Donald Trump in 2020.
Very poggers.
There are 3 reasons I'm going to vote for Donald Trump in 2020 when I didn't 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
First, I was simply wrong about Donald Trump on policy. Second, I wasn't
What
really
policy?
wrong about Donald Trump on character. But whatever damage he was going to do has already been done, and it's not going to help if I don't vote for him this time. And third,
I feel like that's a weird one. Like, I feel like if your whole thing is like, hey, I don't particularly care for the moral fabric of Donald Trump, it's like, well, what? Like, you think it's like I don't know. It's a weird one to me. Like, that's fine if that's like an argument. It's a good argument. But like, the fact that it's a non-factor anymore is weird to me. If your argument's like, I'm voting for Trump because I think Biden is really stupid, okay, I can buy that. But like, you don't think that you don't think, like, why would you change on the moral corruption?
most importantly, the Democrats have lost their minds.
All right, that's fair.
So, first of all, Donald Trump is governed pretty conservatively. I thought he would not be conservative in his governance. I was just wrong on that. Donald Trump radically cut regulation. You actually saw reductions in the number of man hours dedicated to dealing with regulation for the first time in a long time under Donald Trump.
So, like, listen, I disagree with the he's right. Yeah, Trump has been more conservative. So if your argument's like, I like the conservative things Trump does, that's great. That's fine. I just don't see that as a net positive. I don't see, like, reducing regulation is going to have a long-term negative impact, right? So, like, the reason that, like, Obama put in a lot of regulations for a lot of banks and whatnot and other jobs is because, like, they crashed the economy, in 2007. You guys remember that? And part of that was because of unregulated banks. And so, like, you put those regulations regulations in, and like, yeah, they hurt growth, but they part of that, like, right. So one of the ways that the banks fucked us was that like there were banks that were leveraging the worth of their bank upwards of like 30 times their worth on very risky investments, and then they were faulting, and then they were getting government money to get bailed out. And like you could say like, oh, just don't bail them out, but like, you know, there are banks that are too big to fail. So it's like, come on, we're in that point where we have monopolies, and then like, you know, that's like a thing. Like conservatives should be on board with that. We have like bank monopolies where if they're too big, they'll fail, and people are like, no, just whatever. It's like, well, why don't we split the banks up? No, you know. So if you're like, well, we shouldn't have to bail them out, fine. So let's split the banks up. No, we don't need to do that. So we don't need to split the banks, and we shouldn't bankroll them if they fail. So we're gonna kill our economy. Basically, if those banks fail, we're just going to have our economy is going to die. So we're put in this harsh spot. So it's like, hey, let's regulate the banks so they can't make these events. No. It's like, come on, what are we going to, what can we do? It's like, there's always a goddamn thing, you know? And then even these tax cuts that Trump made, it's like, we should be trying to get to a point where we're in a surplus. We're in a deficit. We're still in a deficit. Our deficit's higher than it was under Obama. Obama inherited a $1.4 trillion annual federal deficit. It went down to $650 billion. But then Trump's got it back up to $1 billion before coronavirus. So it's like, we need to be trending down, because guess what? We hit some kind of recession every 10 years. There's a fucking catastrophe. You know, dot-com crash 2001, Great Recession 2007, coronavirus 2020. And it's like, we need to be economically prepared to deal with it, right? So we need to be we need to have like a financial surplus to deal with it. But whatever. Again, like,
he appointed originalist judges to the best of his ability. We're talking dozens of them, textualist, originalist judges who actually care about the role of the judiciary. He cut taxes.
Oh, he put conservative judges in there. Who cares?
Jogging the economy, raising it to heights not seen.
And I talk about how like it wasn't worth the offset. Like, it's not sustainable growth, you know, because like the reality is that before the coronavirus, these massive tax cuts, $200 billion a year onto the annual federal deficit, and we needed to sustain a 6.7% GDP growth just for it to be offset by taxes. We were at a consistent 2.5% before the coronavirus. It's just unrealistic trickle down economics that is not the best bang for your buck.
In half a century, the lowest unemployment rate. In half a century, people having their wages.
Wait, somebody just said, wait. This is funny. Someone's like, hey, Ben has a $150 mic in front of him for no reason. I'm like, why would you say that? And then like, he has a fucking mic right here. Why does he have this? What is this? What is this here for? Is it just an aesthetic piece? That's silly.
Rise at the bottom of the spectrum. He appointed pro-life people to the executive branch and pursued pro-life policy via executive order. He dumped out of the idiotic Paris Accords, which were useless and counterproductive.
I don't think that that's true. Like, basically, Ben Shapiro's like, hey, I'm voting Trump because like all these policies that I didn't like, Trump's like doesn't either. That's fine, like if he aligns with your value. But I would say, like, you know, the Paris Climate Accord, was it expensive or whatever? You know, sure, fine. We're already leading the world in like reduction of emissions, but you guys have to understand. And this, I come from a place of like, honestly, like I come from a place of true America first, not like this kind of fake America first bullshit. So when you tell me that America's in the Paris Climate Accord, leading it, what you're telling me is that this is another way in which America, the greatest country in the world, has some form of leadership position over the world. That's what I look at. Okay, I'm much more interested in like American dominance and you know, power. And that's another way that we have power over the world. And we pulled out of that, not only making our word look bad, but reducing our overall power. And like, that's ridiculous to me. I like, were we losing in it? Sure. We were giving more than we were receiving, for sure. But it just gives what, like, if you think America's the greatest country in the whole world and you think we should spread Western ideals to everybody, why would we not want to maintain power?
Dumped the even more idiotic and evil Iran deal, which gave money to the Iranian mullahs to use for terrorism, as John Kerry freely admitted.
Well, I mean, like they got their money back, right? So we were withholding money, and then we gave it back to them once they went to the Iran deal. But like, let's understand, Iran was complying to the deal, and like, I hate it when. I hate that conservatives like will shit on Obama for the Iran deal, even though it was working, but then they'll praise Trump for trying to do something with North Korea, even though it's not working. You know, and it's like, how are you so okay with compromise when it comes to North Korea, but you're not okay with compromise when it comes to Iran? And I just find it to be, a case of like cognitive dissonance.
Donald Trump crushed ISIS.
Despite the fact that like there was all signs point to failure in North Korea, and we failed there. Like, no, it doesn't really matter. North Korea doesn't really matter per se. It's more like China, because China has North Korea under their foot.
He killed al-Baghdadi. He killed Qasem Soleimani. Donald Trump is the first president.
The Soleimani, man, he won out on that one. That was like a risky, bold move, and he did win out on that. I'll give him credit.
President of my lifetime not to start any new wars, which is a kind of big thing. He moved the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. He brokered the first meaningful peace deals there in 3 decades in the Middle East. He cracked down on China in unprecedented ways. He's resisted using the federal government to...
That's fair, but like then when the coronavirus hit, he was like, China's doing a good job, and then now we found out they weren't. Now he's like, right? Because he opted out of investigating the root of the coronavirus.
Control everybody's life during COVID. That's a big thing.
Wait, what did he do?
Ways. He's resisted using the federal government to control everybody's life during COVID. That's a big thing.
Wait, what? It's an interesting spin on that one. And the only reason I say that is because, like, with the control of our life, and I'm in New York, is like, hey, we're going to shut down, and then we're going to reopen with masks and social distancing, and making sure that like we use disposable stuff and make sure people don't get sick. And that just feels like that's not life control. That's just trying to be safe. We have these very population dense areas in particular that are affected much more heavily, which is why they need to be more heavily regulated, like New York. And it's just like, oh, well, that's shitty. It's like, I don't think it's so shitty, man. I think that perspective is a little bit privileged. Like I would say that you live well off enough where you don't really see the negative impacts of the coronavirus. Like, you bitch about not being able to go out when you were just never going to go out anyway. I've had family and friends pass away to the coronavirus. I understand that severity. I understand like how shitty it is to be put in a situation where you have to work through a pandemic, and how toxic and catastrophic that can be, especially for the elderly. And so I just disagree with that as positive.
This is the biggest government power grab of my lifetime, and Trump refused to do it. Donald Trump restored due process on college campuses because he actually cares about due process,
That's
or at least
fair.
the Secretary of Education does. Popular opinion.
Sorry, I had a bug. I tried to kill it. I was trying to be faster than the bug, and I was wrong.
Donald Trump has not actually threatened the institutions. The fact is that Donald Trump may have been hemmed in by his own people. Whatever the rationale, he has not threatened the press. He has not threatened the legislature.
Well, I mean, he's. I guess he hasn't governmentally threatened the press, no, but he does. And like, there is an issue with progressive media shitting on Trump, but like, he actively just lies. He's not exactly like the voice of reason in a country full of lies, or in a media state full of lies. He just wants to like fucking say whatever he wants to say, even if it's not contextually accurate, and then he gets upset when people call him on his shit.
Use the executive branch in nearly as powerful ways as Barack Obama did. Trump hasn't been as conservative as I would like on everything. He's spent way too much money, like oodles too much money. I actually care about that stuff.
Well, he spent on what? I'd like to know on what. Was it the subsidization of farmers so we can engage in the trade war? Was it the military increases? Did you just not want to say, like, I didn't like that he increased the military budget? Are you trying to avoid that?
His perspective on trade is a zero-sum game. I think it's wrong-headed. He still signed into law the USMCA, which is a pretty good trade deal. But these are problems I've had with a variety of Republicans, including George W.
I don't know if I'm right about this. My understanding is the USMCA was like basically the same as the old deal. It's just a little bit different.
Bush. Trump has governed overall in a far more conservative fashion than W on policy. He is the most conservative president of my lifetime on policy. Of course, Ronald Reagan left office when I was 4 years old.
Yeah, but you're not even that old, Bo. You're like 35. The fuck are you talking about?
Second, times change. When I said I wouldn't vote for Trump in 2016, I was worried about 3 things. 1, policy. Again, I was wrong. Second, I was worried about the soul-sucking of the Republican Party to approve bad behavior, the people nodding and grinning at bad stuff Trump did.
Yeah, that kind of happened, honestly. So I want to give you like a little for instance, because you guys are going to have a meltdown when I say this, but I'm still going to say it because this is like the reality of life. So Trump totally leveraged money going to the Ukraine to try to get them. He basically was trying to bribe them and said, I'm going to withhold our money to you until you investigate Joe Biden. And people are like, no, he didn't. He did that. Like, he totally did do that. 100% did it. Like, objective fact. And people are just like, yeah, it didn't happen. Right? There were, and like, you guys missed it, but there were a couple of Republicans that were like, you know what? We know he did it, and it's bad, but it's not impeachable. And like, I could kind of get on with that. I could be like, okay, that's fair. I don't agree, but at least you're acknowledging the problem. But most Republicans were just like, nah, it just didn't happen. It was like, you're fucking dumb. And like, so it was happening. There was constant excuses for Donald Trump being morally corrupt, especially the morals that conservatives hold so dearly. So if this doesn't exemplify how people are willing to fold on their morals when it's convenient, I don't know what is.
A lot of that has happened. And third, I was worried about toxicity down ballot, right? Losing House seats, losing Senate seats, blowing out the Republican Party with minorities and women and young people.
Did I just go off on a whole tangent before, and none of you motherfuckers told me my mic was muted? You stupid assholes. I hate all of you so much. Did you guys see any of the thing that I said about Donald Trump getting impeached? Did you hear any of that? Did you guys hear about the whole impeachment thing? Yes or no? Oh, you did hear the impeachment shit. You guys heard? Okay. Okay, you hear the... Okay, thank God. All right. So, like I was... Your check's blowing up. Like I was saying just now. Let's just re-listen to it, because now I'm just...
A lot of that has doesn't stop. But here's the thing. Party with minorities.
There we go.
Right? Losing House seats, losing Senate seats, blowing out the Republican Party with minorities and
all
women
right.
and young people.
That what I wanted to say there before I fucking muted myself, or what I was saying, was that, like, I understand what he's saying. He's saying, like, hey, I don't like the idea of just putting people in those positions to appear woke. But it was like bad display, bad delivery. You know, it just helps to be contextually accurate.
A lot of that has manifested. But here's the thing. It's already manifested. And me not voting for Trump in 2020 doesn't stop that from manifesting.
No, it kind of does. You can reverse, like, what you would consider moral corruption.
Like, I've been very, very clear on my feelings about Donald Trump's character. I have serious reservations, to say the least. Trump has some good qualities, right? He's a hammer in search of a nail. Sometimes he hits a nail. It's super satisfying. And sometimes he hits a baby, and it is far less satisfying. Trump hitting the media, it's often justified. I mean, the media have exposed themselves as just a pure dumpster fire of leftist garbage.
Yeah, sometimes. But again, like, Donald Trump, like, lies constantly, so.
They've treated him as an enemy from the very first day. They've
That's
promulgated
true.
false narratives.
That's
They've
true.
lied about things that he has said. They have taken the worst interpretation of everything he could possibly have said.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that Trump hasn't been vindictive or petty or immoral. He does all those things. Trump being unable to focus and willing to jump on any rake is not just immoral, it is very often stupid and counterproductive. I mean,
Sure.
You know my opinion on this. Everybody knows, okay, deep down in the cockles of your heart, no matter how much you love Trump.
This guy just say the cuckolds of your heart? What the fuck's the matter with you, man? I don't have a cuckold in my heart.
Everybody knows the Trump administration, with Trump on teleprompter more often and less on Twitter, would be in a position to win the 2020 election more easily.
God damn it. God damn it, Ben. Fucking tabula. Shut the fuck up.
Trump's tweets
I gotta get YouTube Premium.
damage him with people who don't already love him. All of that is true, right? But all of it is not changing. There's a group of people out there who every time Trump tweets something newly stupid, they get newly enraged. I think most Americans, basically, this is all baked into the cake at this point.
That's a silly argument. The argument that, like, we should all just be used to how fucking dumb he is like a really shitty argument, Ben. Honestly, that's a dumb argument. You know it. It's like, yeah, Trump says some dumb shit sometimes, or all the time, and we know it, so we should just kind of move past it. It's like, come on, dog.
I think it's important, deeply important, for conservatives to criticize Trump when he requires it. When Trump does something bad, we should say it out loud. We shouldn't hide that.
True.
And that's why I've been calling balls and strikes on Trump as a president since the day he was elected. But 2020 is not 2016. Everything that is bad about Trump is already part of the system. It's already part of the new normal, for better or for worse.
So worse, come on.
Me avoiding voting for him in 2020 doesn't change that. Third, and most importantly, the Democrats have lost their f***ing minds. They've lost their minds.
Don't curse on my microserver.
So have members of the mainstream media. So have members.
I would say that, like, yeah, for sure, a lot of like Democrats have lost their minds. And while Joe Biden is literally losing his mind because he's fucking slipping mentally, I would say that like he's actually pretty reserved. He's pretty moderate left, all things considered. So like when it comes to climate change, like a lot of like the far leftist narrative is like, oh, it's spent $100 trillion over the next 5 years, or it's not. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. Where Biden is like, hey, we'll kind of make our Green New Deal with a more realistic target and like less expensive, you know, and like that's, you know, same thing with healthcare. It's like we're not abolishing the private option, where we're gonna make sure we spread a public option. It's like, okay, so like Biden actually has some decent takes. So to say that he's like a representative of that like far leftist bullshit, I think is a little bit dishonest.
Members of our bureaucracy, so members of academia, people must not be allowed the mechanisms of power. Our most crucial institutions, from corporate America to the universities, they've been corrupted, top to bottom, and giving them power over your lives, more power over your lives, huge mistake.
Wait.
Institutions. These people must not be allowed so members of our bureaucracy, so members of academia, these people must not be allowed the mechanisms of power. Our most crucial institutions, from corporate America to the universities, they've been corrupted, top to bottom, and giving them power over your lives, more power over your lives, huge mistake.
So like from the academia perspective, I get what he's saying, but like what's funny is he's talking about it from a corporate perspective, and it's like, dog, you would realize that deregulating banks is like contributing to like that corruption, right? Like that corruption of corporate America. It's like that's the corruption of corporate America you would be talking about is basically is taking advantage of people for the sake of power, and like that's what they're doing. So like deregulating banks is not helpful.
The Democrats are no longer the party even of Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. They're the party of Bernie Sanders, and they're just wearing around the mask of Joe Biden.
Well, I disagree with that a bit, because Joe Biden's far more conservative than the Bernie Sanders face. I mean, realistically, there's like a very small minority of far leftists in politics right now. And so this argument that he's proposing is it doesn't matter who you elect, it's always going to be the far leftists. That would be the same as if I had said that it doesn't matter who you elect, it's always going to be the far right wingers. And like it's actually a rather, again, dishonest and disingenuous argument.
They're the party of Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. Joe Biden is a Potemkin village of a candidate. He is not a bulwark against radicalism. He is a facade for it. Everybody knows it. That's why Bernie is touting him as the most progressive presidential candidate since FDR. There's a reason that Noam Chomsky is on board with Joe Biden. Right? I mean, if you just watch the...
Well, I mean, he is. Like, the policies that he's adopted are policy. Here's the thing. It's like yeah, I get it, but like the reality is like having a shifting policy narrative isn't inherently bad. So it's basically like if you ask your dad for something and your dad's like, let's say I don't know, fucking know. Let's say you tell your dad you want to build a whole ass solar system, right? And your dad's like, okay, we could do that, but let's do it this way because it's more practical. That's what Joe Biden is. You know, even if you don't like him, like. The idea of adopting some kind of like universal healthcare system that's like maintains private insurance, that's not pandering. That's just that's listening. You understand what I'm saying? The what the middle is shifting, and more people want universal healthcare. More people want to deal with climate change. You understand? More and more people want to deal with the coronavirus. And this idea that like just because he's on the left means he's pandering, or just because he's giving in to some of those demands means he's pandering, and not that he's actually just trying to like, come to a compromise, I think is a little silly.
This stuff, you should scare the hell out of me. Today's Democratic Party is not even the Democratic Party of Barack Obama circa 2008.
Sure,
Barack
probably.
Obama circa 2008 supported traditional marriage. Barack Obama Obama, circa 2008, was not openly in favor of packing the courts or getting rid of the filibuster.
That's fair. That's true. But like that's fine. But like the one, like, why did you need to, like, you basically, Ben just said, hey, Democrats used to not like gay people, and I kind of liked that. You realize that's what he just said, right? Like, come on.
Barack Obama in 2008 used to speak about personal responsibility sometimes. Like, all of this is just gone. The Democratic Party is now the party of radicalism. The simple mandate for the Democrats is this. They now believe in cramming down their perspective on everyone they can via any force that they can control.
Well, I mean, like, that's not really Democrat exclusive, dog. That's just how we are. That's how we've encouraged this shitty two-party system to just throw around their power as much as possible. It's why the Republicans, when they had control, they made it so that Obama couldn't elect a Supreme Court justice, and it's now why they're avoiding the logic of a president in their last year shouldn't be able to elect somebody. But now all of a sudden they can. So Barack Obama wanted to elect somebody 8 months towards the end of his presidency, and they're like, no, too soon. And then Trump's like, oh, I got 3 weeks. Let's go. Let's get her in. You know what I'm saying? It's a power grab. It's a scam. It's not Democratic exclusive.
They believe that you should be forced by law to violate your religious beliefs if it conflicts with their social views.
What?
They believe that the science says we have to destroy the free market in the name of the environment.
What?
They say that unborn babies aren't babies, that men can be women. And if you disagree with any of that, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, and you're a terrible person. They believe...
Let's go through that piece by piece.
Science says we have to destroy the free market in the name of the environment.
Nice face. That's a little, like, okay, so like the far left is sure, but Biden's plan to combat climate change is pretty decent, and it's like progressive, but it's not toxic. In fact, my understanding is that Wall Street's saying that it will be better for the economy than what Trump's doing. So, like, you know,
they say that unborn babies aren't babies, that men can be women.
That's true. They say they're not babies. I don't like the abortion narrative that we're pushing because it's toxic from a social perspective. I'm pro-choice, but I'm pro-choice because it's the necessary evil, not because babies aren't babies.
And if you disagree,
and men are women, like that's like a whole argument on trans. I don't think that Shapiro. I think that he's a bit fragile. He's a little too fragile, and he can't have that honest conversation about trans people because he just is so much of a traditionalist. But I do understand there's a toxic level to it of like not explaining your gender or like trying to even bother explaining what being trans is to people, and that's something that I've made a lot of like headway with, especially when having a conversation with Desmond Fabrini. It was fantastic.
Disagree with any of that, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, and you're a terrible person. They believe that your right to keep and bear arms should be heavily infringed, if not outright abolished.
I don't know. Well, yeah, if we're talking about the far leftist, sure.
They believe that due process comes second to intersectional identity, that we shouldn't judge you as an individual, we should judge you based on your racial group.
I get what you're saying. I don't necessarily fully disagree, but the problem is that your response to systemic racism is it doesn't exist, right? So like the leftist narrative is like your identity matters too much. The right wing narrative is that it doesn't matter at all. And then like the normal person who's not like mentally inept is like, yeah, I understand systemic racism and that from a systemic level we need to combat it, but from an individual level we need to treat people the same as we would treat ourselves.
They believe that America is systemically racist, rooted in sin and evil, founded in 1619, not in 1776.
What? Yeah, no, it kind of is.
They believe that we
had slavery. That's kind of evil, yeah.
Single disparity in America can be chalked up to racism and bigotry and America sucking.
I would say that like that's fair. Not everything is always like a victim complex, but still like you're refusing to acknowledge it, which hurts your argument.
They believe in racial, sexual orientation quotas, overt discrimination.
Sure, but those are out of necessity for the marginalization of those particular groups.
They believe in a hierarchy of victimhood. If you're low on that hierarchy of victimhood, you should shut up. If you're high on the hierarchy of victimhood, you can say whatever the hell you want. You will never be held accountable.
It's so funny because like this is it. Like this is the point where like we've hit a point of intersectionality, right? And like all this other shit, we're having conversations about it. And like the theory actually makes a lot of sense. The application could be a bit rough, but like, you know, these people are starting to have a meltdown over the idea that like you might have like white people have like the normal level of standard in America generally, and it's uncomfortable to people that like others have a lower level, and it's partially because of like the racism. It makes people very uncomfortable. I would argue it makes racists or non-racists very uncomfortable, I guess, but still, I don't know, Ben. You're a little bit rough when it comes to like common sense when it comes to systemic
They believe
racism.
that economic freedom should be curbed in the name of income equality. They
Um,
care far less about growth and prosperity than they do about some bizarre notion that equality is its own good. They're complicit in a culture.
it's such a weird argument. Like, I don't know, man. I guess, but like again, I'm a UBI guy, so I think that like battling their class inequality is a great way to battle systemic oppression.
Culture war on anybody who disagrees. They seek to ruin anybody who stands in their way.
Sure.
They'll activate the media. They'll
Sure.
activate social media. They'll
That's-
activate their
that's true.
friends in academia to get all of that done.
He's got a good
Meanwhile,
point there.
they'll make room for Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They will cheer the rioting,
BLM's not that bad, man. And like the whole rioting, he's gonna say
looting,
right.
or at least they'll go along with it and refuse to condemn it.
Like, bro, honestly, the media doesn't give a fuck about black people. They don't. Media doesn't give a fuck. All right. So like what he's talking about is kind of true. But like the problem is that every time the media thinks a story is interesting enough to push, it's always some fucking huge exaggerated situation where like it's very easy for conservatives to like be like, oh, I don't agree. And they don't talk about the nuances of it. So let's talk about like Michael Brown, for instance. Michael Brown was shot, went through, he stole something, and then he charged a police officer, and we'd be like, oh, Black Lives Matter. And it's like, that's not a good situation necessarily of Black Lives Matter. Like like honestly, like, and then progressives won't even talk about the fucking DOJ report where the DOJ report was like, yeah, the cop was in his right, like within his rights to shoot the kid. But like they didn't talk about the whole part where like that DOJ reports like it said like that the police officers in Ferguson were violating the constitutional rights of those people. And it's like we only talk about these issues when it's like something that's palpable for like people. It's like, oh shit, a black kid was killed, like systemic racism. But it's like, but nobody's talking about real shit. You don't see CNN talking about like these fucking like these small like situations. You don't see CNN talking about things that like fucking matter. They just talk about like they go for the extreme. They don't talk about BLM when they're like chilling and like, hey, we had BLM was trying to advocate for this today. It's like, no, it's like, hey, a black guy died in a questionable circumstance. Let's weaponize it as a black issue. And it's like, bro, like even with George Floyd, it wasn't a BLM issue. It was a fucking corrupt police officer issue. Like it was totally like what the fuck am I trying to say? Police brutality. But like, you understand what I'm saying? Like the media doesn't give a fuck about black people unless like it gives them views or it can like help them weaponize some fucking plan or like, hatred against a candidate they don't want. They never give a fuck when like it's real. They don't give a fuck about real issues.
But if you go to church during a pandemic, you are a danger to society.
Well, yeah, you are. Why? Why are you going to fucking church in a pandemic? Why do you feel the need to go to church? God's not going to protect you, dog.
If you go to grandma's funeral, you're super dangerous. But
Grandma can't have a funeral. My uncle didn't have a funeral. Very sad because he was a very loved man. But the coronavirus robbed us of that, and it's actually very unfortunate. But it's that's just the reality of life, man.
If you are out there rioting and looting and burning things, that's just a philosophy, guys. It's not a movement. It's not an organization, as Joe Biden said.
Well, I mean, I don't think Antifa is like a hardline organization. It's just a bunch of dumb white kids running around like fucking morons. And, this idea that like black people just are not allowed to just fucking stand up for themselves, man.
They literally will not even condemn Antifa. Okay, Antifa is a terrorist organization. They will not condemn it. They will not condemn.
They're fucking maybe kind of sure. I mean, that's fair. I'll give them that one.
Black Lives Matter protests that escalate into rioting and looting. They think that there's no relationship whatsoever between an ideology that suggests that America is at root evil.
Well, America is at root racist. I mean, see, that's where your fragility shows as an American, right? So, like, the non-acknowledgement of like inherent racism in America is like why. It's like, why are you so mentally fragile? Like this idea that all of your core values that you've revolved your life around are based on racism, it shatters you. And instead of trying to better America, you're just like, nope, can't handle it.
And that every institution in American life is infected with that evil and the rioting and the looting. On foreign policy, the Democrats want to kowtow to Iran. They want to re-enter the garbage Paris Accords.
And no offense, but like, what America doesn't give a fuck about black people again, unless they're like unless they feel like they have to care about black people. The only reason that we're getting anywhere with like these police restrictions is because of those riots. And I don't like those riots, but like you had a meltdown because like Colin Kaepernick was kneeling for the flag. You're like, keep it out of sports. It's like, shut up. Like he's using his he worked maybe he didn't work hard. Who cares? But he was using his platform to talk about black issues. Like, that's not the right way to do it. So what is the right way to do it? You're like, just do it. Basically, you said, just do it. I just don't want to see it. And so if you don't see activism, then you're not going to give a fuck. So you give people shit when they, when they're protesting at football games. You give people shit when they're looting and rioting. Like, what's the appropriate space to be an activist in the right way that you'll actually see?
They want to make nice with China. They've threatened to destroy the Electoral College, pack the Supreme Court, abolish the filibuster, add states by simple majority to vote Democrat. They say they'll use impeachment as a purely political tool. In fact, they've even said they want a congressional committee to use the 25th Amendment to get rid of a sitting president. They seek to centralize all power in...
Well, it's again, like Trump did leverage the United States for personal gain. Like, he's trying to withhold money from Ukraine for them to investigate Biden. And you might say, like, well, maybe Biden should have been investigated. Maybe. But why did Trump wait until Biden decided to run before he decided to play this game?
In the executive branch, and they hope to overrun the powers of the states. They're aided in all of this by corporations, the mainstream media, and pretty much anybody else they can get their hands on. They've created a social...
It's funny that corporations are only evil if they're leftist, but the right-wing ones, they're not evil. Ironically, overall, I'd say that like the new wave of like progressivism is trying to, destroy that corruption in the way that people getting like underpaid, and like we're not even like, that's not a big deal to people. It's like they're getting, if they support gay rights in a disingenuous way, that's evil. But like if they underpay their workers to a point where they have to go on welfare like Walmart does, that's okay. You get what I'm saying?
Social structure dedicated to ostracizing anybody who dissents on leftist dogma. If you vote for Trump, you are evil. Your friends should stop talking to you. You should stop talking to your own parents. Maybe you should be fired. Certainly, people should stop treating you like a human being. So, here's the deal. I'm voting for Trump. You don't have to love Trump's character. You don't have to like his Twitter account to vote for him. You don't have to approve of the crazy or bad things that he says or the way he often acts. But if you care about the Constitution and economic freedom and the security of the United States, you really don't have a whole hell of a lot of choice. You should vote for Trump. You should certainly vote against Joe Biden and a Democratic Party that is running completely off the rails and now threatens the integrity of the Republic if they are given the levers of power.
I'd argue... That's nice. Listen, you want to do whatever you want to do. That's fine. I would argue that every time we make a step towards the far right or the far left, we're just advocating for another step towards the far left or far right. All right. Voting for Trump, in my opinion, because he is rather, he's rough, man. He's hard to defend. Because he does, kind of advocate for far right. Well, not even advocate, but he, people in the far right like him quite a bit. I would say that Donald Trump is far right, though. Like, he's not even fiscally responsible. I mean, it's rough. People have an argument against intersection, but I was saying, voting for Trump is really just pushing us farther left because we're just getting more and more polarized. The argument with intersectionality and the advocation against its existence, fuck, I just lost my thought. Okay, let's go with a good example. I'm just fucking sitting here like a moron. So there's this narrative nowadays where you can't be racist towards white people, okay? And we're bringing it up for a reason. You'll see where I'm going with this. And my argument is that the reason why that's toxic is because it's going to give white supremacists ammunition to go, see, I told you they're trying to oppress us. And it's just another case of every time we're moving farther left, it's just encouraging moving farther right. It's polarizing us. And that is, to an extent, what voting Donald Trump is doing. It's going to, you vote Donald Trump, you vote somebody who's more farther right, you're going to advocate for more far left reaction. I'm not saying Biden is great. Biden is a dated, ignorant person. Right? He's dated. He's an old fucking white guy. We really need to move away from old people specifically in politics because they don't really give a fuck. But he's better than Trump. Unfortunately, I'd like to see two completely different people. I'd like to see somebody. Let's see, give me like a Dan Crenshaw. He's not too bad. His position on climate change is like, hey, let's do more carbon capture technologies and let's pressure. China and India more. That's great. If you put that into a policy, I'll buy it. But that's not what we got. We got two old, dumb fucking white people. And you just got to pick the better of the two. It's the reality of the situation. Like my rambling for like fucking 5 seconds. I couldn't even fucking talk. I want to say thank you so much, guys, to all my Patreons, and a special shout out to my Papa XL Patreons. Without all you guys, I would just be some fat dude screaming into a microphone. So thank you so much, guys. Mwah. I love you all. I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.